Overcrowding at a migrant processing centre in Kent. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says conditions have worsened since the summer. The situation at the Manston facility is now described as wretched. Inspectors urge the government to get a grip.
The fact that this is happening for women, children, families and other migrants is a great concern for us.
After the Home Secretary spoke of an invasion of migrants, the Immigration Minister tells the BBC politicians must be careful with language, but also straight with the public.
It is a very challenging situation with no simple solutions, but we're going to do everything we can to restore order and security to our borders.
We'll be live in Manston and Westminster with the latest. Also this lunchtime. More debate about a windfall tax after the oil giant BP reports global profits of more than £7 billion in the 3 months to September. The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has been suspended as a Conservative MP after revealing he's to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
It's that man again, Chris Jordan.
England's men's cricketers keep their World Cup hopes alive with a crucial victory against New Zealand. And from the hand of God to the auction house, the ball used to score one of football's most famous goals goes under the hammer.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, the Women's Rugby League World Cup gets underway this afternoon as hosts England take on Brazil at Headingley.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says conditions at the Manston Migrant Processing Centre in Kent have worsened since the summer. In July, the facility was found to be working reasonably well, despite a number of risks. But since then has deteriorated significantly, with the situation now described as wretched. It comes as the Immigration Minister told the BBC that politicians should be careful with language after Suella Braverman claimed southern England was facing an invasion of migrants. Our correspondent Robin Brandt has this report.
Flying the flag in red, white and blue, the Home Secretary still has questions to answer. A polite smile was all she offered on her way into Cabinet this morning. On the overcrowding crisis at Manston Migrant Processing Centre, the question is what she did, didn't do and plans to do going forward. Yesterday she likened it to a military attack, but that's language her own colleague refused to repeat.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast.
Well, I think it's a phrase that expresses very clearly the concern that millions of people feel across the country. Of course, as a minister in my position, you have to choose your words carefully, but I think that the scale of the challenge is very significant.
A new report describes conditions inside these marquees as wretched. Migrants off boats are supposed to be processed in hours at Manston in Kent. Instead, there's a huge backlog.
They're sleeping by and large on the floor. There are sort of rubber mats down, and then on top of the rubber mats they're putting blankets to turn them into sort of rudimentary mattresses. But it's cramped conditions. There are not proper beds. People are sleeping on benches in some of the marquees. And generally it's very uncomfortable, and particularly in the tent that's given over to families.
Working out what caused this, who caused it, remains challenging. The local Conservative MP is still blaming the Conservative Home Secretary.
5 weeks ago, quite clearly the policy changed. The Home Secretary, I still believe, although she has said otherwise, decided not to commission more accommodation for people to be moved on into. And we then got the most horrible backlog which we've got now.
In Dover, on the front line, it's a daily worry for some locals, as the numbers coming over on small boats edges close to a record 40,000 this year.
a lot of people have just had enough. I feel sorry for the people that are being exploited, but hey, you know, that's costing about £5 million a day in hotel bills. Yeah. So, no, something needs to be done.
To me, it is getting out of hand. They say they're coming in because they're refugees, but a lot of them are not. They come from a safe country. Now, I might understand if you come from a safe country, you're not a refugee, you're a migrant.
Robin Brandt, BBC News.
Well, let's go straight to our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford, who is in Manston. What's happening there this lunchtime, Daniel?
Well, the Immigration Minister said this morning that there were going to be a lot of efforts made to move people out of this migrant processing centre over the next few days. And certainly we've seen a number of coaches going in this morning, probably 4 or 5 coaches. None of them have yet come out. A number of migrants also left last night. So there's clearly an attempt to try and get the number that was 4,000 on Sunday afternoon back down to a more manageable level. But remember, only 48 people crossed the channel yesterday. So by definition, the more than 3,000 people that are still in this migration centre have been here more than the 24 hours that it was designed for. This is not a place with beds and all kinds of arrangements for people to sleep. It's a place where people are essentially sleeping on mats. We've seen people queuing up this morning to use the portaloos through the fences. So this is still a place which has got very poor level of facilities for people spending any length of time here, and certainly there are still 3,000 plus still inside the centre.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Let's get more as well from our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley. Following all of this at Westminster, and still a difficult situation, all of this for Suella Braverman, Nick?
It is, Jane. You know, there's been a lot of controversy around Ms Braverman for the last few days, and there's been quite a lot of controversy over those comments she used in the Commons yesterday when she talked about an invasion in the south of England. Criticism from opposition parties, from charities, even from some Conservative MPs who think that the language was inflammatory. And it is worth just highlighting that a minister in Ms Braverman's own department wouldn't fully endorse her language this morning. Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, saying that it was important that people in his position chose their words carefully, that yes, Ms Braverman was trying to convey the sense and the scale of the problem, but it wasn't a phrase that he had used. However, I think that the Home Secretary is probably a bit more relaxed about having rows over language and just how tough she's prepared to be on this issue than she is about what caused the backlogs that Daniel was just talking about at Manston. Although she denied yesterday that she'd blocked any people being moved out of the facility to hotels, there are still some close to the process who are alleging that she didn't do everything she could to speed up the process and was warned that that meant that the government wasn't following its legal duties. The Home Secretary told Cabinet this morning that there would be large numbers of people moved out of Manston in the next few days. The government will be hoping that that eases the overcrowding. I mean, some of the pressure on this goes away, but there are still those questions about the Home Secretary.
Nick Eardley for now. Thank you. The oil giant BP has reported global profits of more than £7 billion between July and September. The figure is more than double that for the same period last year, driven by higher prices resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's talk to our business correspondent, Caroline Davis, who's been looking at the figures, which, again, Caroline, suggests the phrase windfall tax. It's what people talk about again.
It is. It's the discussion that people keep having. So this isn't a massive surprise that we're seeing this level of profits. It's slightly higher than some analysts thought. But we've also heard, of course, from Shell last week. We've also heard from Aramco, from Chevron, multiple of these big oil and gas companies that produce the oil and gas making very large profits. As you say, this is partly to do with the fact that there have been supply issues relating to the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. There's also increased demand because after the end of the lockdowns and the pandemic, a lot of the economy opened up again, so there was an increased demand for these energy bills as well. Now, along with this announcement from BP about the amount of profit it's making, they also said that they are expecting to pay around £700 million in the UK's windfall tax. So they are paying the windfall tax. That's different to Shell, who announced last week that they didn't think they were going to be paying that this year in 2022 because they're able to offset that against the investment that they've made in North Sea oil. But despite the fact that they are going to be paying this level of windfall tax, there's still this discussion about whether or not windfall taxes should be expanded. At the moment, this sort of tax isn't causing a massive financial headache for for companies that are making this level of profit. So more and more politicians talking about oil companies bearing a bigger burden, given that we are seeing a lot of people struggling around the world with energy costs and the cost of living. We've heard this from President Biden. We've heard this from the COP president, Alok Sharma. And there is an expectation that potentially other countries around the world, potentially even in the UK, does this go any further? There's a lot of political discussion about it. OK,
just a very quick thought as well about suggestions today of higher taxes generally.
Yes, so this is something that the Treasury are briefing. Again, they're talking about the fact that more people, everyone is going to have to pay more tax. Now, exactly where those taxes are going to fall, whether big oil giants are going to be in their sights, we won't know until the budget on the 17th of November.
All right, Caroline Davis for now. Thank you. The boss of National Grid has renewed warnings that households and businesses could face short power cuts this winter. Though John Pettigrew told the BBC that the grid is working on the basis that the UK has sufficient energy supplies to get through the colder months. It's announced a £50 million fund for charities helping people with their energy bills.
And our baseline report said that we expect there to be sufficient generation to meet all the demand this winter. And in fact, it looked very much like previous winters. And similarly on the gas side, there are plenty of sources of gas to meet the demand that we're expecting this winter.
John Pettigrew from National Grid. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has been suspended as a Conservative MP after he confirmed that he will be taking part in the TV programme I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Matt Hancock was Health Secretary for much of the COVID pandemic, but resigned in June last year when it emerged he'd broken his own social distancing guidelines by kissing a colleague. Let's find out more from our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake at Westminster. So what reaction to all of this? What's being said, Jonathan?
Well, Jane, after Matt Hancock resigned as Health Secretary last year, he said there's a lot you can do for the people you serve from the back benches. Bush tucker trials in the Australian jungle may not have been what his constituents had in mind, but we're told that he doesn't expect to return to government and so sees this as a way to show that politicians have a human side and to promote his dyslexia campaign. He'll donate at least some of his fee to charity, we're told, and wants to help get the Prime Minister and the government's message across to younger voters. But Downing Street have clearly taken a bit of a dim view, saying that it's unlikely the Prime Minister will be tuning in to watch, adding that MPs should be out working hard on behalf of their constituents. Now, some are seeing a funny side. The deputy chair of Matt Hancock's local Conservative association said, "I'm looking forward to him eating a kangaroo's penis." But others criticising the decision to appear on the show. The Liberal Democrats say he should forego his salary as an MP while he's appearing. Labour's Chris Bryant said there's something deeply unpleasant about it during a cost of living crisis. And the COVID bereaved Families for Justice group say that Matt Hancock is trying to cash in on what they say was his terrible legacy as Health Secretary.
Jonathan Blake, thank you. South Korea's police chief has said the emergency response to the fatal overcrowding in Seoul on Saturday evening was inadequate. It's the first acknowledgement from officials that they didn't do enough to prevent the crush that killed 156 people. Tens of thousands of people were out in narrow streets in the Itaewon area of the capital to celebrate Halloween. And it's emerged that police received phone calls earlier in the evening from people who were worried about the size of the crowds. Jean McKenzie sent this report from Seoul.
4 hours before the deadly crush, people could see the disaster coming. The first call to police was made around this time. The caller predicts what comes next.
People are coming into the alley, but they can't get out. I barely escaped. It seems like people are going to be crushed to death.
By the end of the night, 150 people would be dead.
anybody looking at it should have seen that this was an accident waiting to happen. It's just, if it really felt like it was so preventable.
Police today revealed they'd taken numerous of these warning calls. This solemn bow from South Korea's head of police, an acknowledgement they'd failed.
사고 발생 이전부터
We think our response to those calls was inadequate, he says, and I bear a heavy responsibility. The other question is why police weren't sent ahead of time to control what was expected to be an enormous crowd. Because these young people gathered spontaneously, it wasn't clear who was responsible for keeping them safe. And with this came another admission.
I agree that there was some deficiency in that crowd management, and we will reform and correct.
Discarded clothes belonging to the dead are still in the gym where their bodies were first taken. This tragedy will be a lesson, South Korea's Prime Minister said, for us to change and become a safer country. It's unlikely these were the only mistakes. Jean McKenzie, BBC News.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited the site of the collapsed suspension bridge, which killed 134 people in western India. The catastrophe happened in Morbi, in Mr Modi's home state of Gujarat, on Sunday. With search operations in a third day, the authorities say nearly everyone believed to be missing has now been accounted for. The authorities in the Ukrainian capital say water and electricity supplies have been fully restored following Monday's Russian attacks on city infrastructure. Kyiv's mayor said scheduled blackouts would take place to manage electricity demand. The latest strikes appear to be part of a longer-term strategy to damage civilian infrastructure in the run-up to winter. And the government has revealed details of a previously secret programme to help defend Ukraine against Russian cyber attacks. UK experts have been helping with what's been described as a daily onslaught on government and infrastructure computer systems. Our security correspondent Gordon Carrera is with me. So tell us more about this plan, what the UK has been doing here.
Yes, this was put into action just as the invasion took place in February. And what the UK has been doing is providing expert investigation skills for the Ukrainians to detect and then investigate some of this huge toll of cyber attacks that Russia has been launching against Ukraine. In some cases, they've tried to take down aspects of the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure on which Ukraine relies, the things like electricity we've just been hearing about. In other cases, they've been trying to spy, to collect information, even to collect targeting information about specific individuals. And the UK has been providing forensic expertise to investigate and stop those attacks. A lot of people thought Ukraine would be taken offline almost completely, and that hasn't happened, partly because the Ukrainians have been very good at defending, but also because they've had some of this help.
And also more information today, the annual review of what goes on in this country, or what threats might be posed.
That's right, the annual review from the National Cyber Security Centre. That's actually an organisation which has been helping in Ukraine, but its annual review gives an insight that it's not just about international geopolitics, but it's about some of the cyber threats at home. It talks about 18 national level ransomware incidents where computers are locked out. This affected NHS 111 and a water utility here in the UK. This is often criminally based, though. And there's also talk about 2.7 million online frauds having taken place in the year from March 21 to 22. And that gives you a sense of the volume of cybercrime that's going on out there and which affects very much ordinary people's lives.
Gordon, thank you. Gordon Carrera, our security correspondent. The time is 19 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. Overcrowding at a migrant processing centre in Kent. The Chief Inspector of Prisons says conditions have worsened since the summer.
And at Headingley, England women will get their Rugby League World Cup campaign underway this afternoon against Brazil.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Josh Butler on form as England keep their men's T20 Cricket World Cup hopes alive with a 20-wicket win over New Zealand in Brisbane.
People in Israel are voting for the fifth time in less than 4 years in a general election that's again expected to be an extremely tight race. The country has been locked in an unprecedented period of political stalemate since 2019, when its longest-serving leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, was charged with bribery, fraud and breach of trust, which he denies. He's now hoping to stage a comeback with the help of parties from the far right. Our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Knell, sent us this report.
Everyone makes a last-minute ditch for their candidate as Israelis head to the polls again. This election day seems familiar, but the results won't just be shaped by how people vote. They'll come down to the deals done.
Israel has this very fragmented political system and it always relies on coalition governments. But what's really unprecedented is to have this period of such political stalemate where there are now 5 elections in under 4 years.
Since the longtime leader Benjamin Netanyahu was charged with corruption, which he denies, the country's been deeply split. Current PM Yair Lapid has campaigned on official photo ops. Last year, he drew together an ideologically diverse coalition which pushed Netanyahu from office. But this is the story of this election, the rise in popularity of the far right. Where there's a flashpoint, Jewish supremacist Itamar Ben-Gvir is always there. For years, he was on the political fringes. Now he's being talked about as a potential cabinet minister. An alliance with veteran dealmaker Benjamin Netanyahu. Here, waking up an unsuspecting 18-year-old to tell him to cast his ballot could see him return to power. But for voters, no one has cornered the market.
So I'm planning on voting to a Zionist religious party, which is going to both support my beliefs on security and on religion. And hopefully we'll have good results.
Etty wants Lapid to stay.
Who knows, maybe he will be better, but you have to give you a chance, because Netanyahu 12 years didn't do nothing.
So then who do you think has got the answers?
I'm not sure, but I hope maybe Netanyahu or, yeah.
You think Netanyahu is coming back?
Yeah.
So what does a seasoned election watcher have to say?
The main thing really to look out for on election night will be which parties manage to cross the threshold, and if some of the parties on the anti-Netanyahu side fail to cross the threshold, that means his chances have been significantly boosted.
And with polls predicting another close finish, Israelis know there's the possibility of another deadlock and having to choose all over again. Yolande Knell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Lorry drivers in Brazil who support the outgoing President Jair Bolsonaro have escalated their protests against his election defeat to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The drivers are blocking roads throughout the country, and there are concerns that the action could disrupt food exports. Brazil's highway police said 321 protests had partially or fully blocked roads across at least 13 states. Now to the cricket and the T20 World Cup in Australia. England have kept their hopes alive there with a crucial victory. They overcame New Zealand in a match they had to win to retain hopes of qualifying from their group. Joe Wilson has been watching.
One thing was immediately clear in Brisbane. Yeah, no rain. England's batting had to be bolder, better, like that from Alex Hales.
At the moment.
Like this from Jos Buttler. Finally at the World Cup they looked something like the real thing. England's captain made 73 in the total of 179. And then Jos Buttler was back in the action as wicketkeeper. His catch, New Zealand's first batter out. Here's Glenn Phillips with a miss-hit. Moeen Ali with the missed catch.
No, I don't believe it.
Yeah, really. Soon Phillips was caught by a chap in the crowd. Well, he's a huge hitter, potential match winner. England conveniently had their best catcher on the field for the final overs. Chris Jordan was there. Phillips was out, and the victory by 20 runs followed. England aren't in the semi-finals yet, but win their final group game, and they should be. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
The Women's Rugby League World Cup kicks off this afternoon with the hosts England taking on Brazil in Leeds. 15,000 fans are expected to watch the game at the Headingley Stadium. Let's cross to Sarah Mulkerrins, who is there for us. Hi, Sarah.
Thanks, Jane. Yes, we all saw what the Euros did for women's summer over the summer, and now Rugby League is hoping for similar as the Women's World Cup gets underway. As you've been saying, England are taking part. They are the only home nation, in fact, to be playing in this tournament, and they will open their campaign here at Headingley this afternoon, taking on Brazil, who are making their debut in the competition. And it is the first time that the women's event and also the wheelchair tournament will take place alongside the men's competition, which is at the halfway point. It's a move to a more inclusive future, with England's players also getting paid to play for their country for the first time. There have been sacrifices to get this far. The players, they have had to juggle training and playing alongside careers and childcare. And the PE teacher, Emily Rudd, she is going to lead out the team this afternoon at her 4th World Cup. She's been speaking this week and has been asking fans to come out and support the team as they try to inspire a future generation and create a more sustainable future for the game. Brazil, though, they are an unknown quantity this afternoon. They only formed in 2018, and this is just their 3rd international. However, the England boss, Craig Richards, he is hopeful of a win today, and more importantly, a win for that trophy at the end of the tournament.
Thank you very much, Sarah Mulkerrins. Enjoy that, Sarah Mulkerrins, with all the latest there on the rugby. Now we turn to the ball that Diego Maradona used to score his Hand of God goal against England at the 1986 World Cup. It is soon going to be sold at auction, and it's thought it could fetch £3 million. Our correspondent Nesta McGregor has been to Wembley, where it's on display before it goes under the hammer.
The centre of attention, on display at Wembley, the home of English football, 36 years after causing England's players and fans so much heartache.
Maradona just walked away from Huddle then.
Mexico City 1986 World Cup quarter-final, England versus Argentina. 0-0 until Diego Maradona decided to take matters into his own hands, punching the ball beyond the onrushing Peter Shilton. The ball seen crossing the line has been in the cupboard of the Tunisian referee until now.
Do you admit it was a mistake, and is there any guilt about now profiting from that decision?
I don't feel any guilt at this point, and the infamous hand of God is part of the game, and in football there is no guilt whatsoever if you think you made the right decision.
In contrast, Maradona's second goal was one of the greatest the world's ever seen. His team won the game 2-1, and the striker eventually went on to lift the trophy.
He won't need any of them. Oh, you have to say that's magnificent.
England's players were left to lift each other's spirits.
People have said they can't get close or touch it. Could you?
Well, I didn't on the day, and I'm not going to try now. No, it's iconic. It's amazing seeing it, and it's in the memory bank, and good memories and bad memories.
Earlier this year, the shirt worn by Diego Maradona in that match sold at auction for more than £7 million. The ball is expected to fetch upwards of £2.5 million. There's likely to be no shortage of bidders eager to own a piece of the Hand of God, but they'll have to put their own hands deep in their pockets. Nesta McGregor, BBC News.
Now, plenty of us would argue that 2022 hasn't been a great year, with political turmoil, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis uppermost in our minds. And that is all reflected in this year's choice of the new words selected for the Collins Dictionary. Daniel Rosney can tell us what they are.
We started the year talking about one thing, Sue Gray's report over Partygate, the social gatherings around Downing Street during lockdown. We entered a new age in September as the Elizabethan era transitioned to Carolean, using the Latin name for Charles. From a new role to those already in post, because we're also being introduced to the act of quiet quitting, those who do only their basic duties at work. They might also be into a bit of splooting, which is to lie flat on the stomach with the legs stretched out, something animals do to reduce heat, seen in the unprecedented weather this summer. The annual list is to reflect our ever-evolving language.
A number of the words that have really come to the fore have actually been quite serious, because I think that reflects the situation we're in. So we have Warren Bank in the list as well, which describes a place like a library or a place of worship that people can go to warm up without having to pay to put their heating on at home. And also Vibe Shift, which describes this kind of change in the general sort of contemporary mood.
You know you're a fake. You know that your whole network, the way you cover it, is fake.
Previous years, phrases like fake news, binge watch and climate strike were all listed, but this year's word of the year is used to describe the feeling of living through a period of war, inflation and political instability. Permacrisis. Others may prefer to use another choice word or two. Daniel Rosney, BBC News.
And that takes us to a look at the weather prospects wherever you are in the country. Helen Willits is with me. Hi, Helen.
Hi, Jane. Ferocious was the, word to describe the winds last night in the south. But actually, I want to take a look at October's rainfall, because although it's been average, we're heading in the right direction, if you like. It has actually been well above average in Northern Ireland, and the rainfall figures for last night and yesterday are still being collated. And Changeable as well describes our weather for the next few days. Another deep area of low pressure barrels in tomorrow. That rain hangs around in the south. More low pressure Thursday before finally a drier day, we think, on Friday. But it doesn't last. There's more rain waiting in the wings. So, as I say, heading in the right direction. This chart shows accumulations of rainfall as we go for the coming few days. So the blues get deeper as that rainfall starts to total up, perhaps as much as 40 or 50 millimetres in many places by the end of the week, particularly higher ground, but a good 20 or 30 at lower levels. And the showers are bringing a lot of rain. Of course, by the showery nature, not guaranteed for all, but we've got lots of thunderstorms around at the moment with these showers as well, and gusty winds too, still gusting at 40 or 50 miles an hour in the south, so it's not as strong as last night. So drier, or driest, potentially northern England, Scotland, and drier for Northern Ireland, but still look at the temperatures. They should be between 10 and 13 at this time of year. It's still mild, but not quite as mild tonight. The showers keep coming and going through this evening, but after midnight tend to fade away for a short period of time. And so we could see, single-digit figures, so perhaps a little bit of grass frost and also a little bit of mistiness in a few places first thing in the morning to watch for. But again, more wind and rain is on the way. Widely windy, inland gales, severe gale force winds forecast around the Irish sea coast, and several hours of quite persistent rain. Now, it doesn't look as if it'll reach the south and east until after dark, so pleasant and mild here, but windy. But elsewhere, some pretty atrocious driving conditions, certainly, and still mild, although tempered by the fact that we've got those strong winds and heavy rain. Then once the rain does finally reach the south and east during Thursday, Wednesday night into Thursday rather, it hangs around. Now, the uncertainty, it's often the case with one of these waving weather fronts, is how long it'll last and hang around. But at the moment, it looks like a pretty wet day on Thursday, lots of for the south and east, lots of showers following, and perhaps a drier window of weather elsewhere, and temperatures close to the seasonal norm. We haven't seen that for a while. But again, it doesn't last. We've got more low pressures moving in, as I mentioned, for the weekend. But perhaps ahead of that, on Friday, for a day, we might have a drier spell of weather for a time, but more rain. Still needed rain is on the way, Jane.
All right, Helen, thank you very much. Helen Willits there. And that is it from the news at 1 for today. On BBC One, we'll join our news teams now, wherever you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.